Welcome to the Qargo Training Academy. Here at the Academy, you can find answers to some of our most frequently asked questions, introductory training videos for new Qargo users, and how to set up and use some of the more advanced features of the software. Let's get rolling and see what is on the agenda today. Setting up rate cards for the variety of pricing models of all your customers can be quite a task. There are lots of options available, and the Qargo system gives a lot of flexibility. Today, we will look at a pricing model that is frequently used for customers who base their charges on distance and use this to generate the transport charge on an order. Once the transport charge is set up on the rate card, any additional charges can be added, for instance, fuel surcharges or extras based on priority services or stops. Transport charges can be based on lots of different factors. Companies that are hauling freight over the road will often use a mileage rate applied to the trip distance. This type of rate works well for longer trips, however, over shorter distances, charging this way may not really offer a good solution. For these trips, companies will often negotiate a flat rate. These may be tiered rates based on distances until a threshold for the per mile rate has been met. So for this kind of pricing model, we need a price list that will allow us to include a flat rate with rate tiers based on shorter distances, as well as a per mile rate once an agreed distance threshold has been met. Let's build a new price list. First, let's navigate to the Rates menu and select the Rate Card Customer submenu. Here, you will see a list of all the transport services you offer. You can expand each transport service to see the individual rate cards created. This is where you can open the individual cards and make any edits necessary. We are going to create a new rate card, so we will go ahead and click on Create Price List. Next, let's select the transport service we want to create our new price list under. Now we can start to build the price list details. First, we need to give it a name. It's a good idea to use something that allows you to easily identify the price list, like any customers it might be for, or if there are specific details. For this example, we are going to be building a customer price list that has prices based on two different distance criteria, including a fixed price over selected mileage tiers and a per mile rate once the threshold mileage is reached. There. This name should help me identify it easily when looking through the list. Next, I'll set the valid from date. You'll notice the default date is the current date. Let's save the general information and move on to adding the pricing parameters. Each new price list will automatically have a transport charge, so we can simply click the edit icon, this little pencil here, and begin to add our charge parameters. First, I can set my charge to be valid for a specific time frame. For instance, if I routinely update pricing, I can create these prices to all have a valid from and to date, and by clicking Add Collection, I can quickly copy and update the charge, selecting the appropriate action. For this example, let's just set the valid from date. We'll match my price list and move on to adding the calculations. Remember, for my price list, I have to allow for both short and longer distances, therefore I will need to have two calculations. The first calculation will be for the shorter distances, which will have a few different rates based on the total distance of the trip. To do this, I'll need to use the calculation method price table. This will let me build out a table with all the separate mileage tiers. Next, I'll say how I want that price to show, and in this case, it will be a fixed amount based on rates that I'm going to enter in the table. Now I have the option showing to edit price table. This is where I can enter all the price data and build my table. Okay, let's build our price table. There are options for up to 3 columns or metrics, but we just need one for the mileage tiers. For the metric, I'm going to select distance and total, which is going to look at the total distance of the trip. Let's select the filter type as between. This is going to allow me to set a start and end range for the mileage. The last thing we need to set is the unit of distance that we want these ranges to represent. Because we're looking at mileage, I'm going to set this to miles, and there is also the option for kilometre if that's preferred. Okay, we have built our metrics table, and now I can enter my data. When using ranges, there are 2 between filter options. End exclusive is where the end value is 1 less than the value entered. So if the range was set as 0 to 100 miles, it will be 0 to 99 miles. 100 is then set as the start value in the next range. End inclusive will include the final value in the range, so if set from 0 to 100, it will include 100. Starting the next tier with the same value will ensure any decimals are accounted for. All right, we have the details added. The last step for this calculation is to add the rates. Click on the Rates tab and there is a new table. This one includes the metrics from the previous page. In each row, we see the individual mileage ranges that we set up. All that is left is to add the individual rates to each tier. Here's a little tip. If you have rates that apply to more than one section, you can copy them by clicking and dragging the frame around all the fields that you want to copy the rate to. Okay, now we have all our rates entered. Let's make sure we click OK and be sure to click Save on the price list screen. Okay, that's the first calculation done. This calculation looks at the shorter distances up to 500 miles. So let's give it a name which will help to identify what the charges are. You can also include a description if that's helpful. Let's move on to the second calculation, which is what we want to use if the trip distance is greater than 500 miles. For these charges, we want the charges to show as a per mile rate. So we want to use the metric option as formula. We'll use a rate that will be applied over a total distance, and this is going to be per order. Next, let's enter the unit rate, which will be our per mile or per kilometre rate. We're going to include the total distance with no rounding options. You can see here there are a few different options for the distance amount. So you can increase or decrease the distance based on a percentage, or if you allow a set amount of miles for free, you can set this here. The offset is the amount of mileage that you don't want to include in the overall calculation, so the free amount. Okay, now we have our two calculations, we need a way to distinguish when to use the different calculations. To do this, we need to set conditions on the calculation. This will tell the system which option to use based on the mileage. Click Add Condition and new fields will show up where we can enter the parameters. Under the metric, we are going to use the option for total distance again. Next, we'll set this as greater than or equals and enter the threshold limit, which in this case is 501 miles. Now let's go ahead and click Save. If you did not make the price list applicable to all customers, you will need to link the completed price list to your customer so you can begin to use it. Click Link New Customer and select the customer you want to add to the price list. You'll note the valid from date here is the date of the price list, not the current date. And there you have it. We have a new price list which will now use the total trip distance to generate a per mile transport charge. If the threshold of 500 miles is not met, the charges will be based on tiered flat rates that we set in the first calculation. For any trips 501 or greater, we should see the per mile rate be applied. Let's build an order and validate our price list is correct. Remember, our order will rate based on the total trip distance, and we have two calculations to check depending on the mileage of the trip. Here, our order has a shorter distance, less than 500 miles, and we can see this is rated £390 based on second tier for mileage between 100 and 200 miles. Let's see what happens if I change this to a different delivery location a little further away. We can see the price has changed now and is over our threshold rate of 500 miles. The charges now show based on the per mile rate. As you can see, the new table is working as we would expect, pulling the rates through based on the total distance, including both the tiered shorter distance and the per mile rate for longer distances. So there you have it. We have created the new price list using a price table based on the total distance of the trip and have two rates based on short or long trips. And we have built the order to validate the price list is correct. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning a little more about Qargo. Check out the Qargo user manual for more videos and articles and learn what other features can benefit you.